In 1993, a wig shop worker in Illinois won $18 million. 8 years later, she walked into a courtroom with $700 to her name and $2.5 million in debt. If you think that could never happen to you, stay until the end. Because the reason it happened has nothing to do with luck, and almost nothing to do with how much money she actually won. This is the story of Janite Lee, and the 3 decisions that turned $18 million into nothing in less than a decade. Janite Lee immigrated from South Korea and built a life in the Midwest the way most immigrants do, one paycheck at a time. She worked at a wig shop, nothing glamorous, no financial safety net, no family fortune, no connections, just a steady job and a lottery ticket she bought like millions of other people do every week, without expecting anything to come of it. In 1993, her numbers hit. She won $18 million in the Illinois state lottery. Here's something most people don't know about lottery winnings that large. You almost never get the full amount in one check. Janite's prize was structured as an annuity, $620,000 a year, paid out every year for 20 years. That structure exists for a reason. Lottery commissions learned a long time ago that handing an ordinary person a lump sum of $18 million overnight tends to end badly. So instead, they spread it out, slow the windfall down, force a kind of built-in patience. In theory, that structure alone should have protected Janite for 2 decades, no matter what she did with any single year's check. Overnight, her income went from a wig shop paycheck to more money in 12 months than most Americans earn in 10 years. She moved her family out of their old life and into a gated $1 million community. New house, new neighbors, new version of herself. And almost immediately, she started giving. Now, this is where Janite's story becomes more interesting than the typical lottery winner cautionary tale, because she wasn't reckless in the way you'd expect. She didn't disappear into casinos. She didn't throw the money at parties or disappear on a decade-long vacation. She gave over $1 million to political campaigns. She dined with sitting political leaders at fundraisers most people will never get near in their lifetime. She donated enough to a university law school that they put her name on a reading room, a physical, permanent monument to her generosity. On paper, Janite Lee looked like someone using sudden wealth exactly the way we tell people they should, to build relationships, support institutions, leave something behind. But underneath the generosity, there was no system. And that detail matters more than almost anything else in this story. She bought her new house on payments instead of paying for it outright, even though she had the means to. She leased a fleet of luxury cars instead of buying modestly and investing the difference. She borrowed against money she hadn't received yet, essentially spending next year's $620,000 check before it arrived. And whatever gap was left, she put on credit cards, multiple accounts, compounding interest, no plan to pay them down beyond the assumption that more money was always 1 year away. And this is where it gets worse, because the one decision that guaranteed her financial ruin hasn't even happened yet. If you're new here, this channel breaks down one real financial story like this every week. What actually happened, the exact decisions involved, and the psychology behind why it happens to smart, well-intentioned people and not just reckless ones. If that's useful to you, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Now, here's how it all fell apart. At some point, deep in debt and needing cash faster than her annual $620,000 check could provide, Janite made the decision that sealed her fate. She sold the rights to her remaining future payments to a structured settlement company in exchange for a discounted lump sum today. This is a real industry. Companies that specialize in buying lottery annuities and legal settlements off of people who need money immediately, paying them a fraction of the total future value in exchange for taking on the rest. It's legal, it's heavily advertised, and it is, for almost everyone who uses it, a financial trap disguised as a solution. Think about what that 20-year payout structure was actually protecting her from. It was her safety net, the one thing standing between her and total collapse, guaranteeing $620,000 a year no matter how badly any single year went. The moment she sold those rights, that safety net was gone. Once the lump sum was spent, and it was spent quickly, absorbed by the debts she'd already built, there was no next check coming, no cushion, no reset button. The debt she'd accumulated kept compounding, and with no more guaranteed income behind it, there was nothing left to cover it. In 2001, 8 years after winning $18 million, 60-year-old Janite Lee filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Court documents listed less than $700 in assets, $2.5 million in debt. The woman who had once dined with sitting politicians and had a university reading room named after her was, on paper, worth less than the lottery ticket that had started it all. And if you think this was some kind of statistical fluke, a 1 in a million bad outcome, it isn't. Billy Bob Harold Jr. won $31 million in the Texas lottery in 1997. 20 months later, he was broke and tragically took his own life, reportedly telling his financial advisor shortly before that winning the lottery was the worst thing that ever happened to him. William Bud Post won $16.2 million in Pennsylvania in 1988. By the time he died in 2006, he had less than $1 to his name, having burned through the entire fortune on failed businesses, lawsuits from his own family, and spending he couldn't explain even to himself. Different people, different states, different decades, the same ending. That pattern is the actual subject of this video. Not Janite Lee specifically. The pattern. Here's what actually happened, psychologically, in all three of these cases. A sudden windfall without a financial structure behaves exactly like income you'll never run out of, right up until the day you do. There's a name researchers use for this: sudden wealth syndrome. It's not about intelligence, and it's not about character. Janite Lee wasn't stupid, and she wasn't selfish. She simply experienced what almost every human brain experiences when a number that large appears in a bank account: the complete loss of any internal sense of scale. $620,000 stops feeling like a number with a bottom. It starts feeling infinite. And once money feels infinite, the part of your brain that normally says, "We can't afford that," simply goes quiet. 3 specific things guaranteed the outcome, and they apply just as much to a promotion, an inheritance, or a business windfall as they do to a lottery ticket. First, no system, a written budget, a financial advisor with actual authority to say no, a trust with built-in restrictions, anything that puts distance between the money and the impulse to spend it in the moment. Windfalls without a system don't survive contact with normal human psychology. Second, she sold her own safety net. Structured payouts exist specifically to protect winners from themselves, spreading the money over decades so that no single bad year, no single bad decision can wipe everything out at once. Trading that structure for a lump sum wasn't just a bad deal financially, it removed the one guardrail standing between her and the exact outcome that happened. And third, generosity without a plan bankrupts you just as fast as greed does. This is the detail people miss most. The credit card company doesn't care whether the $600 charge was a donation to a good cause or a designer handbag. Debt doesn't distinguish between selfish and selfless. Without a system, both paths lead to the same courtroom. The amount of money was never the problem. $18 million, structured properly, should have supported Janite Lee and her family comfortably for the rest of her life. The problem, every time, in every one of these stories, was the absence of a system standing between the windfall and the spending. So here's the question worth sitting with. If you suddenly had $620,000 landing in your account every year for the next 20 years, would you actually have a system in place before the first check arrived? Or would you, like almost everyone in this position, simply start spending and assume the plan would figure itself out later? Most people only answer that question honestly after it's already too late to matter. If this kind of real financial story is useful to you, not just the drama of what happened, but the actual psychology behind why it happens, subscribe, because a new one drops every week. And if you want to see what happens when the windfall isn't a lottery ticket, but an entire career's worth of earnings, watch the next video, because the ending might surprise you even more than this one did.